Blunkett prophecy, when immigration policy reality bites. Picture this. It's 2004. A Labour Home Secretary stands before Parliament, his voice carrying the weight of prophecy. David Blunkett, speaking with the authority as someone who understood the delicate balance between compassion and control, issued a warning that would echo through 2 decades of British politics. He warned that weak immigration policies would inevitably lead to a crisis that would test the very fabric of our nation's border security. Today, as we watch dinghies breach our shores with alarming regularity, one has to wonder, was Lord Blunkett not just a politician, but something of a political oracle? Because here we are, 20 years later, and the numbers don't lie. They never do. Over 180,000 souls have crossed the Channel since this crisis began in 2018. That's not just a statistic. That's a city the size of York, arriving uninvited on our shores in small boats. And this year alone, we're looking at nearly 29,000 arrivals, making 2025 the most challenging year yet for Channel crossings. The question isn't whether Blunkett saw this coming. It's whether anyone in power was actually listening. Let me paint you a picture of just how farcical our current situation has become. Meet Ali, not his full name, mind you, because even our asylum seekers understand operational security better than our border policy apparently does. This Iranian gentleman applied through Sir Keir Starmer's much-vaunted one-in, one-out agreement with France. He did everything by the book, followed the proper channels, dotted every bureaucratic I and crossed every administrative T. And what happened? Radio silence. Nobody called. Nobody responded. Nobody seemed to care that someone was actually trying to use a legal pathway that our leaders had spent months negotiating with such fanfare. So what did Ali do? He got into a dinghy in Gravelines and crossed the Channel anyway. His family in the UK, yes, he already had family here, kept him updated on the discussions between our Prime Minister and President Macron. Picture the irony. While politicians posed for photographs and made grand announcements about cooperation, a man who wanted to follow their rules was forced to break them because their systems simply didn't work. This isn't just policy failure, it's policy theater of the absurd. The one-in, one-out scheme, which was supposed to be the silver bullet that would restore order to our borders, has become something of a cruel joke. Shadow Home Secretary Chris Philp put it rather bluntly. With over 28,000 unlawful arrivals this year, Labour believes that returning 100 of them will make a meaningful difference. The mathematics alone should make any serious politician blush with embarrassment. But here's where Blunkett's prophecy becomes particularly chilling. He understood something that seems to escape our current crop of leaders. Immigration policy isn't just about numbers and processes. It's about perception, incentives, and human nature. When the odds strongly favor those who take the illegal route over those who attempt the legal one, you create a system that actively encourages lawbreaking. Allah's story isn't unique. It's becoming the template. The smugglers know this. The migrants know this. The only people who seem oblivious to this reality are the very people crafting policy in Westminster. When Chris Philp states that, if you get across the Channel, you stay, he's not making a political point. He's stating an observable fact that everyone except our policymakers seems to acknowledge. Consider the scale of what we're witnessing. On Bank Holiday Monday alone, a day when most of us were enjoying a lion or a barbecue, 659 people arrived in 9 boats. That's not a trickle. It's a steady stream that has become a flood. August alone saw over 3,500 arrivals, and since Labour took office in July 2024, more than 52,000 people have made the crossing in small boats. These aren't random fluctuations. They represent a system in complete breakdown. The human cost of this failure extends far beyond statistics. Border force teams are racing across the Channel in what has become a grotesque version of maritime rescue operations. People in orange life jackets, a color that should symbolize safety but has come to represent the failure of legal pathways, disembark from catamarans onto British soil, each arrival a testament to the inadequacy of our current approach. Lord Blunkett understood something fundamental about British governance that seems to have been forgotten. Effective policy requires both humanitarian concern and practical execution. His prophecy wasn't born from callousness, but from a clear-eyed understanding that weak policies don't just fail. They create the conditions for greater suffering and chaos. The Home Office's response to this crisis reads like something from a dystopian novel. They speak of comprehensive strategies, and international intelligence sharing while people continue to cross the channel in ever-increasing numbers. They mention Border Security Command and improved enforcement activities, as if these bureaucratic constructs will somehow overcome the fundamental reality that their legal pathways don't function. When officials claim they're working to detect, interrupt, and break up criminal gangs, one has to ask why these gangs continue to operate with such apparent impunity. The answer lies in basic economics. As long as there's demand for their services created by non-functioning legal alternatives and minimal consequences for their actions, criminal enterprises will flourish. The government's assertion that they want to put an end to hazardous small boat crossings rings hollow when their policies actively encourage exactly these crossings. It's rather like claiming to want to reduce littering while removing all the rubbish bins, good intentions undermined by counterproductive execution. What makes the situation particularly galling is the predictability of it all. Blunkett's prophecy wasn't based on mystical insight, but on a clear understanding of human behavior and policy consequences. When legal immigration pathways are cumbersome, unresponsive, or simply non-functional, people will find illegal alternatives. When the consequences of illegal entry are minimal compared to the bureaucratic nightmare of legal entry, rational actors will choose the path of least resistance. The tragedy is that this crisis was entirely avoidable. Strong, clear immigration policies with functioning legal pathways and meaningful enforcement could have prevented much of this chaos. Instead, we created a system that punishes those who try to follow the rules while effectively rewarding those who break them. Chris Philp's conservative alternative, the Deportation Bill, represents at least an acknowledgement that current policies aren't working. Whether it would prove more effective remains to be seen, but it recognizes a fundamental principle that Blunkett understood. Immigration policy must have both humanitarian elements and enforcement mechanisms to be credible. The current situation represents more than policy failure. It represents a failure of political honesty. Politicians have spent years making promises they knew they couldn't keep, implementing policies they knew wouldn't work, and expressing surprise at entirely predictable outcomes. The British public deserves better than this charade. As we watch boats continue to arrive on our shores, each one carrying people whose very presence demonstrates the inadequacy of our legal immigration system, we must confront an uncomfortable truth. Lord Blunkett's prophecy has come to pass not because it was inevitable, but because we chose policies that made it inevitable. The question now isn't whether Blunkett was right. The evidence surrounding us makes it abundantly clear. The question is whether we'll continue to ignore prophetic warnings about the consequences of weak policies, or whether we'll finally develop the political courage to implement immigration policies that actually work. Every dinghy that crosses the channel represents not just a failure of border security, but a failure of political imagination and will. Until we acknowledge this reality and act accordingly, we'll continue to see Allah's story repeated thousands of times over, with each repetition making a mockery of both our laws and our humanitarian pretensions. The numbers speak for themselves. 180,000 crossings since 2018, nearly 29,000 this year alone, over 3,500 in August, and 52,000 since Labour took office. These aren't just statistics. They're a damning indictment of 2 decades of policy failure that Lord Blunkett saw coming from miles away. The tragedy is that it didn't have to be this way. Strong leadership, clear policies, and honest communication could have prevented much of this crisis. Instead, we got political theater, bureaucratic incompetence, and a system that actively rewards law-breaking while punishing those who try to follow the rules. As those orange life jackets continue to appear on our shores, each one tells the same story. Our immigration system is broken, our legal pathways don't work, and our enforcement mechanisms are toothless. Lord Blunkett's prophecy wasn't a prediction, it was a warning. We ignored it at our peril, and now we're living with the consequences. The choice before us is clear. Continue with policies that demonstrably don't work, or finally develop the political courage to implement immigration controls that are both humane and effective. The British people deserve policies that work, not political theatre that fails. Lord Blunkett understood this 20 years ago. It's time the rest of our political class caught up. Until our leaders acknowledge this reality and act accordingly, we'll continue to see the same predictable results. More boats, more chaos, and more evidence that weak immigration policies don't just fail. They create the conditions for systematic abuse of both our laws and our humanitarian principles. The prophecy has been fulfilled. The question now is what we're going to do about it. This is a reality of British immigration policy in 2025, a system so broken that following the rules becomes an exercise in futility, while breaking them becomes a rational choice. If you found this analysis compelling, make sure you subscribe to UK Connors for more unflinching examinations of British politics. Because in a world of political spin and bureaucratic doublespeak, someone needs to tell the truth about what's really happening to our country.